Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, he dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now a three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant, insanity.
You gotta be kidding me. Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parish. The Grizzlies play a preseason game on Saturday night. We're all very, very excited. They finally released their new statement jerseys, and I'll talk a little bit about what was heard and uncovered at Media Day, which was back on Monday. I know on Monday's episode, I told you guys, after Media Day, I'll give you an episode on Tuesday or Wednesday talking about the things we uncovered or found out. Guys, there was nothing. There was essentially no news. I mean, I asked people who were there. I depended on the Daily Memphians coverage, and Chris Harrington to tell me, what did we learn? It's nothing. I mean, it's not totally nothing. There were a couple things that I took away, but they're very, very minor. The biggest thing that I heard this week, and it was on the Chris Vernon show, is that Desmond Bane told us that his back was really injured during that Warriors series. He got injured in game 1. We could all see it on the court where Desmond was not getting his shots up. It looked obvious that it was physically painful for him to pump fake. His normal pump fake flyby or getting the defender to fly by those three-pointers, it wasn't there. We saw his field goal attempts go way down. He was talking about how he thought he probably wasn't going to end up playing in game 2 and might miss the rest of the series, but he was able to gut it out and perform, but he was clearly limited. So I thought that was very illuminating about that Warrior series to hear Desmond Bane talk about how badly he was hurting with his back. It explains all the stuff we saw with the lack of shots. It also goes back to, those criticisms of Dylan Brooks I mentioned last episode. Once Ja Morant went down and Desmond Bane is hurt, what was Dylan supposed to do? I mean, Dylan and Jaren struggled shooting. They probably both were feeling the effects of not having the number one options of Ja Morant and Desmond Bane able to carry their normal workload. So some of that, I don't know, it gave some further context to that Warriors series, and I was, again, kind of shocked hearing about how much pain he was in. And then speaking of back injuries, Killian Tilly on Media Day told the media that his back was still giving him problems, which is a terrible omen, I feel like, for his continued involvement on this Grizzlies team. We know they have too many guaranteed contracts. I've been saying it for months, and most others have as well. Tilly's the most likely to get cut before opening night, and finding out he's still dealing with an injury, just a bad bit of luck for him where he can't go out and defend his roster spot and show and prove what he can do on the court. Beyond that, those are the only things that felt like news or maybe raised to the level of news. If you want to infer a lot of stuff, and a lot of the other Grizzlies reporters were kind of picking this up, it seemed like everybody was talking up Santi Aldama. I don't know if that's true, but, maybe Aldama will have the priority in the rotation ahead of the rookies. We will find out very, very shortly. We'll probably find out, on Saturday night for the preseason game against the Bucks. By the way, for that preseason game, I'm doing a live stream over in my playback room. I'll put the link in this show's description. If you've never done playback, you log in with your TV provider credentials. So if you have Bally Sports or League Pass, if you're not in the Grizzlies viewing area, you can log in with your TV provider, and then you can watch the game, the actual television broadcast that syncs us all up, and then I'll also be there commentating. And since Pete and Brevin aren't on the call, you might as well join me over at Playback for the Grizzlies' first preseason game on Saturday. For that game, you got to assume not everybody's playing. And we are going to see, all the rookies get heavy minutes. But I guess the thing to monitor is going to be, of course, who's going to start, and if, in fact, it seems like Aldama is ahead of LaRavia and Roddy in the rotation. Another couple things from Media Day that I can give to you is DeMichael Cole from the Commercial Appeal was saying that Steven Adams might actually shoot three-pointers. I know we saw that clip. There was a video clip of him launching three-pointers and draining them in the offseason. I mean, the forum didn't inspire much confidence, but apparently Taylor Jenkins has told Steven Adams to shoot the threes when he's open. So we'll see if that comes into fruition. And then, and this follows under the muscle watch category, shout out Lang Whitaker in the OG muscle watch, but Jaren Jackson Jr.'s arms are much bigger. This is not the I put on 10 pounds of muscle, the guy's just saying it. You can see it with your eyes. He's physically much larger. Like I don't buy it when people talk about the muscle they added or if they talk about how they got taller. I think Zaire said he grew an inch. The previous 2 seasons, Jaren said he grew, height. But when you can see it with your eyes, you can see the muscles in the arms. You're like, all right, broad-shouldered Jaren. Maybe that'll help him both on defense and on offense and on rebounding. So that's basically all of the takeaways from Media Day. The new jerseys that came out, the Grizzlies officially released the statement jerseys, which had been leaked. They were in NBA 2K, so a lot of people could see them, sort of. Jersey opinions, on the whole, it's totally subjective, but I'd say these work for me. I like them. I think they're an improvement on the regular jerseys. I'm one of those people who actually really dislikes the Grizzlies' main jerseys. I think these are better. I enjoy that MEM trim, the MIM trim that's kind of reminiscent of the old Vancouver, kind of the tribal trim pattern. I like those on the jersey and shorts. I've always been a fan of the yellow highlights against the blue. It is a big departure with the font on the front of the jersey. It harkens back to the early Memphis days, but I like the big departure because, again, not a fan of the basic jerseys. So I think these look pretty sharp. I like the asymmetric trim, like it's going down one side. It's only on one of the legs of the shorts. For critics, for people who don't like them or who say like last year's Navy City jerseys were amazing, why can't we just do those? Or the Stacks jerseys were great, why can't we have those? You can't have them because the rules say you can't have them. The NBA doesn't allow you to reuse your city jerseys. You basically have to do new ones every year. At least that's my understanding. The teams are forced to change their jerseys every year. I agree with you. Last year's navy blue jerseys I thought were really, really cool, especially when everyone wore the yellow tights underneath. I loved them, but like you have to change the jersey every year. It's just part of the deal, I guess, to keep selling jerseys. And then like if you say, well, why can't we do the throwbacks? Like the Vancouver throwbacks are so good, the Vancouver teals or the black early Memphis throwbacks. Again, my understanding is you can't reuse them. You can only do them once, and then you have to wait a really, really long time before doing them again. I mean, I'm sure I'll get a clarification if I'm wrong on that, but that's why we keep changing the jerseys. You can go to the Grizzlies website to check out all the new jerseys. Again, I think they're pretty nice, and the lettering on the front is a pretty large departure. I welcome the change. Finally, and this episode's just a little bit shorter. It's a Friday. I'll put another episode out on Monday morning. I was trying to do the Grizzlies rotation. And maybe it's a silly exercise to do before the first preseason game, and I'll be making too many assumptions. But I tried my hand once again after this entire offseason, after Summer League, after the general feeling at training camp that, all right, maybe Aldama has the inside edge for being opening night starter. Oh, another thing from training camp, again, maybe we're or not training camp, another thing from media day, and perhaps we're inferring too many things here, but when Zach Kleiman and Taylor Jenkins talked about who's going to fill in for Jaren, they never said Brandon Clark's name. Maybe it was just a random blip where they omitted saying his name as a possible starter, but I don't know. So maybe they won't start Brandon Clark when Jaren's out. It might be one of these other players. So using all that information, I thought it would be fun to try to come up with a Grizzlies rotation. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to be even easier to see these things. I'll put up visuals of the things I'm talking about. But like just doing the Grizzlies rotation, if they're fully healthy, not counting Jaren, some parts are pretty basic, pretty easy. Like all the point guard minutes, quite simply, well accounted for. We assume John Morant's going to play 35, 34, 36 minutes per game if the game's close. Last year he averaged, a little over 33 minutes per game. And so there's blowouts, there's foul trouble, not only with Ja, but There's times where he comes off the court, but on a regular game, if it's close, he's going to play about 35, 36 minutes. I assume Tyus is going to play those minutes he's off the court. And I bet Ja and Tyus share the court for a couple minutes every game. So point guard is super easy. We know Dillon and Bane are going to get their minutes. Desmond averaged, right at 30 minutes per game last year. I think it's reasonable to assume in a close game, he's going to play 32, 33, 34 minutes this season. Dillon averaged under 30 minutes a game the last few years. Maybe he's right at that again. Maybe, again, it bumps up a little bit. Let's just say like 32 minutes a game or so. So assigning all those minutes are pretty easy. And when you do this, you start to see all right, we only have a handful of minutes left for like guards and wings. And we assume, I'm going to make the assumption that those are going to Zaire Williams and John Conchar. I think most people agree. We generally agree right now on the Grizzlies' top 8 when Jaren's out. Ja and Dez and Dillon, and then Steven Adams, and then Tyus Jones, Zaire Williams, Brandon Clark, and John Conchar. I think everybody is in unanimous agreement. That's the top 8 until we learn something new. If we're going to build a 10-man rotation, the question then becomes, well, who gets the last 2 spots in a 10-man rotation? We're essentially picking between Xavier Tillman, Santi Aldama, Jake LaRavia, and David Roddy, maybe Kenneth Lofton Jr. Now, in the preseason game, everybody's going to play. So we're not going to get probably a good idea. But for this exercise, when I started doing it, and I started assigning Steven Adams minutes. So we know Steven Adams, he's going to play his normal 25 minutes. That's not a lot. And he's never really played 30 minutes a game for the Grizzlies. That's not his typical thing. So what I started to see, and what I could see visually when I plugged these into a rotation builder, there are a lot of front court minutes that need to be filled. So if I give Steven Adams 26 minutes a game, that leaves 48 minutes for power forward, and then 22 minutes also at center. We know Brandon Clark's going to play. Brandon Clark has never played heavy minutes. Brandon Clark averaged last year under 20 minutes per game. Let's say we give him 22 minutes or even like 24 minutes. That still leaves a ton of minutes that you need covered in the front court. That barely covers the center spot. Because of that, it makes me think that while Jaren's out, Xavier Tillman might be the next guy up. You might disagree, and that's fair. I don't know what the answer is going to be. But when I started doing this rotation, I'm thinking, I think we need a center. I think there's going to be minutes where when both Steven and Brandon are off the court. And I don't feel comfortable with like an Aldama at the 5 or anybody else on the team at the 5. And that makes me think maybe Tillman will be 9th in minutes. So what I did was try to add in Xavier Tillman minutes. And when I started putting him in the rotation, there were so many front court minutes that I felt needed to be filled that I got Xavier all the way up to like 20 something minutes played. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of like Zaire and Conchar playing the 4. That was another thing that I thought could be the solution. I think a lot of us are assuming there's going to be lineups where John Morant, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, and Zaire Williams are all on the court together. I don't know if Zaire or Dillon is your power forward in that situation. The rotation I've built right now, I have them ending like the first half with Dillon and Zaire on the court as your 3-4 with Desmond Bane and John Morant and Steven Adams. That makes sense to me. But there are not a lot of clear answers for me when trying to build out this lineup. Let's go back to the wings, actually, to kind of show you my thought process. Like Desmond Bane's minutes, all right, he's going to start. I assume, Desmond or Dillon, one of them is going to be on the substitution pattern we can infer from previous seasons where they start, they play about 7-8 minutes, they come out, and then they join up with the second unit, maybe to start the second quarter. And for this exercise, I did Desmond Bane. Like I have Desmond Bane coming out 7.5 minutes into the game. Then he's going to start the second quarter. Then he's going to come out again. Then he's going to finish the first half. Similar rotation in the second half. For Dillon and for Steven Adams, I'm going to keep them where they start the first and third quarters. They play a bunch of minutes. They come out. And then by the time they come back in the second quarter and the fourth quarter, they're just going to ride out the rest of the game. So when I do that for the wings with Desmond and Dillon, and I put their minutes in there, that leaves these spots that I've then filled in with Zaire Williams and John Conchar. And now I think Zaire, his minutes are going to go up a little bit. I filled him in and made it about 23 and a half minutes played. For Conchar, I put his minutes a little bit lower maybe because I assumed maybe he's not going to play a lot of like small ball 4. I had him around like 12 minutes per game, 13 minutes where I ended up. My thought process was imagine when I'm watching Melton the last couple seasons, and it was games I was frustrated. And he would come in with the second unit, and then his second half stint would be cut short. So that's what I did for this exercise and limited John Conchar's minutes. And again, repeating myself, it comes back to there's all these front court minutes that have to be filled. Even once I plug in Brandon Clark, there's just big gaps of who's going to play center and who's going to play power forward, who's going to start. For the sake of this exercise, I'll do Aldama as the starter, but because of those gaps in center minutes and because of those moments I have where neither Brandon Clark or Steven Adams is on the court, I use Xavier Tillman. So if I use Xavier Tillman and then leave the opening starting spots for Santi Aldama, it ends up with a general rotation that I think looks okay, and I'm going to have Aldama playing like the first 6 minutes of each half, and then some spot minutes in the second quarters and the fourth quarters. And so if I do a 10-man rotation, and I'm excluding the rookies, I'm sorry, but this is just my best guess at what a 10-man rotation might look like for a game where everyone's healthy but Jaren, and let's say they're trying to win. It's a close game the whole way through. They want to put their best foot forward. So I'm omitting Jake LaRavia. I'm omitting David Roddy. I'm painfully omitting Kenneth Lofton Jr., who, by the way, I think is going to be my favorite player. I don't care if it's too mainstream. It's what everybody else is doing. I think that's what I'm going to go with. But the final rotation, if you have Ja playing his normal minutes, Tyus playing his normal minutes, a healthy Desmond and Dylan playing about 33, 34 minutes each, I've ended up with 23 and a half minutes for Zaire Williams, 21 minutes for Santi Aldama, which is a lot. But if Santi's starting, he's going to play over 20 minutes. This is like the Xavier Tillman thing in the playoffs last year, where I started disagreeing the decision to start Xavier Tillman. And I was like, if you start him, at least pull him out quickly to get Brandon Clark in there. But they never did it. Basically, if you start for Taylor Jenkins, you're going to play over 20 minutes. So if Aldama is the starter, I got him right at 21 minutes. I ended up turning it down where Tillman only played 15 because that felt more realistic. And then I got Tyus Jones at 14 and John Conchar at 13. And I understand if you're listening to the audio version of this show, all that's kind of confusing. I encourage you to go to YouTube and check out this visual so you can see it. But the takeaway is building a rotation without Jaren Jackson Jr. is kind of hard. You're going to have to play some minutes with either Dylan or Zaire or maybe John Conchar as your power forward. The other takeaway is unless you're comfortable with Brandon Clark and Steven Adams not playing together, like if they just alternate, only one of them's on the court as your center, which I don't think makes sense because I do think Brandon and Steven are your two best front court players, and thus I want the team to play them together. So unless you're going to play them only one at a time, it feels like Tillman's going to get in. And this isn't a conclusion I had come to before I tried to physically do this exercise. I've come up with rotations that I generally liked the look of and seemed realistic based on previous seasons. I will say, doing this, I did come up with a lot of lineups I don't like at all. Like right now, I have, in the first quarter, after Ja Morant and Desmond Bane and Dylan Brooks all sub out, and Brandon Clark comes in for Aldama, and then when Steven Adams goes out, I have a lineup of Tyus Jones, John Conchar, Zaire Williams, Brandon Clark, and Xavier Tillman. Not super convinced that's going to be great. I have the second quarter. I have Desmond Bane coming back in to play with some second unit guys. I got Tyus and Desmond with Conchar, Aldama, and Tillman. Not certain that's going to be great, but who knows? There's no reason to go too much deeper into this. I encourage you to build your own lineup if you want to make it look like how you think it should be. I use the lineup tool over on thehoopsgeek.com to build a lineup. I'm curious to see what you guys think is the best way forward for the Grizzlies. But anyway, that is today's episode. Make sure you check out that live stream we're going to be doing on getplayback.com for the Grizzlies' first preseason game. And also, if you're in the Memphis area, go ahead and guarantee your Grizz and get the season's biggest games, biggest giveaways, and best seats at a great price with season tickets, half-season plans. And also, there are now 10-game packs. You can lock in your tickets to see Ja, Jaren, Dez, and all your favorite Grizzlies make big-time noise starting at $11 per game. Get your tickets now. Call 901-888-HOOP or click grizzlies.com. Appreciate you guys listening to this episode. Hope you're having a great Friday. Talk to you soon. Go Grizz.